Hey, baseball fans. Backfields Media back with you for the National League preview for 2031. We've got our opening day date. It will be, if you're watching this recording in February, it will be March 2nd. It will be opening day. Looking forward to that. It is exciting. Let's get right into the review, or preview rather, of what the National League will look like by the end of this season. You see here the preseason predictions is given to us by Out of the Park and the Baseball News Network. They take a lot of abuse for how they put things. However, we'll see just how close they came. Interestingly enough, we're going to start with the Philadelphia Phillies, who had a tremendous offseason, although Baseball News Network was less than impressed. Never mind the fact that they added Rob Deere Jr., J. Rod Carew, Jose Leclerc, Gavin Cross. They did give up Max Ortiz and Joe Olney, Eddie Herring, and Josh Brewster. But I feel like there was a lot of improvement. Philly targeted spots where they felt like they weren't competitive or weren't as competitive, and they worked hard to fix that. Take a look at the pitching for this team. This is one of the real strengths. This top three of Coe, Haversham, and Knight have been together now for a bit. This is a phenomenal 1-2-3 punch in any rotation. Also, James and Leclerc in the bullpen. It's a lot of depth here, and I think that there's a lot to like. Coe could go for another Cy Young award. Knight, if you look at the preseason projections, as I will here in a second, you scroll down and look at the preseason projections. Knight's expected to go 20-5, Coe 19-7, and they're right here, almost back to back, in terms of how BNN sees this as shaping up. I think they're going to be a phenomenal team, and Haversham is no slouch in his own right, plus with the offense. Speaking of the offense, Wade Beers is projected to threaten for the Triple Crown. He's only expected to lose in the batting title race to Cam Candela. And if you look at the profile, you can see why. Just a phenomenally great player. This entire team is expected to hit around 312 homers, far and away the best. Their offense is projected to score 980 runs. There's only one team even within 100 runs of them, and that's Toronto. So Baseball News Network thinks that Philly is going to run away with baseball in 2031. However, this is eMLB, doesn't usually work that way. Not really expecting that to happen. Do they win 114 games? I'd have a hard time saying that, but 105 to 110, certainly plausible, and I think can be expected, quite frankly. This will be the best team in baseball over the course of the regular season. I don't doubt that. Philadelphia is they're on a mission. It was very clear. They are working hard to put a World Series title back in Philly. This is how you do it. Excellent team here. We'll see how they do as the season continues. Let's go to our next club in the National League East, rather, the Miami Marlins. The Marlins made their first playoffs last year. They were an exciting team, made it all the way to the League Championship Series, and gave St. Louis all they could handle. Offensively, they brought in Dylan Humphrey. On the pitching side, they brought in Sean Clisby. They did lose David Leal, which was a huge piece to lose. but we'll talk about the pitching in a minute. Looking at the offense, led by Red Ditt and Eric Von Cola, two premier CCPs, phenomenal players, great all-arounders. Leland Sunder is another. This is a team that has some big names. Fans love to come to see them play. Bryce Harper, here for one last ride, trying to make it to 14th or 15th in the home run. He's right behind Harmon Killebrew, should be able to beat him. The question for this team is, will they be able to create enough runs? They've got a nice heart of the lineup. It's table setting, and the guys in the lower parts of the lineup, can they create some consistent offense? The projection seems to think that they won't. It will be curious to see what they're able to do in the long haul. They're projected to score 700 runs. So, they're going to have to find an offensive spark and someone to start that chain of base runners so that Ditt and Von Cola can be extremely competitive. On the pitching side, they're still, they've got a very nice 1-2-3 punch here. Galasso, Barcelo, and Southwick. They're formidable. They've got a great bullpen. Clisby, we expect, he's kind of soft tossing it in the bullpen now, but you feel like he's going to be on the back end of the rotation. There's a lot to like on the pitching side. There's a lot of depth here. I don't think they're going to allow as many runs as expected. They're projected 700 runs scored, 698 allowed. That's virtually 500. And it's kind of where I see them. I feel like the offensive issues give me pause. Their pitching could get them back to 90-plus wins. We'll see. And it's going to be interesting to see how they go over the course of 2031. Our next National League East team is the New York Mets. And the Mets, they signed closer Carlos Zanagia. They signed Joey Bart to a deal, and they're rumored to be in contract negotiations with Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Last year, they had a heartbreakingly horrible time with injuries. It was one thing after the other, after the other, after the other. And now, they've got to have some hope. They've only got a couple of guys in on the injured list now. They're hoping to keep it in that frame. They are led by the toast of New York, downtown Billy Anderson, who is right in his prime, having his peak years, 30 homers, can hit, throw, run, field, everything. He's the leader of this ball club. This is a very capable offense as well, though. As we look, Jinwoo Kim, left fielder Joe Moody, who kind of came out of nowhere, was kind of a surprise towards the second half of the year, just how well he played. Benny Rodriguez and Dan Snyder, Dwayne Johnson, who's mad at me for leaving him off the top second baseman list. The player that I'm most curious about is Gunnar Henderson, who was a minor league signing for the Mets last year, played in Binghamton in Double-A all last year. He's been re-rated. It will be curious to see how he performs. Does he break with the big club? Does he get tested in the minors first? We'll see. This will be an excellent addition if he can come through on his promise. As far as the pitching goes, they have Jeremy Hoxie, who they re-signed, Jinwoo Kim, who's a great two-way player, Corbin Burns. There's a lot to like here, too. They have a lot of depth in terms of the pitching staff. Good quality depth, J.J. Zolo, who not too long ago was pitching in great games for San Diego. The question is, how much stamina are they going to have? Typically, teams that have a lot of injury problems in one year, the next year tend to have a lot of depth because people have been tested and they've had to change out things where they weren't tested before. And I feel like this is going to help the Mets a lot. As you see the projection for them, they're expected to win 83 games. I think that's low. I see them ending up 87 to 93 wins. I see the Mets in second place and challenging for a wild card spot. That's how I view this team going into the 2031 season. Let's take a look now at the Washington Nationals, who are our next team to review. They were not very busy in the offseason. They did sign closer John Snead. We'll see how, as Washington continues to try to improve the bullpen. They're in the midst of a rebuild. They've got some solid talent, got some great CCPs, Jose Anthony, Mark Diggs, Justin Case, Philip Milwee. One of the big players that I like on this team is young Chris Green, who is going to end up being their superstar. He was their first-round pick in 2027. And now that he's broken out into the big club, I think he's starting to have a very positive impact. I just think we see his batting profile go up and the numbers accordingly. They also have a lot of young talent. You've got Jose Anthony and Mark Diggs are in their prime. Everyone else is below that. They brought in Papa Vaz for a little bit of veteran presence. He's got a few rings. He can remind some of these guys as to how to play this game. I think the offense is going to be okay. I think they're going to score more than is projected for them to score. On the pitching side, you got Joe Diggs, Kizio Narita are the two headliners for this club. They've got some good bullpen arms. What concerns me is the lack of depth. You see here, they only brought 14 guys to spring training, and that's fine. The question is, if and when there are injury issues, or if somebody flames out or something like this, where does Washington go from there? That's going to be a struggle. They are building this team, so it's a work in progress. But the back of the rotation kind of concerns me as well. We will see. They are projected to lead the league in strikeouts, which I found kind of odd. The pitching kind, not the hitting kind. The Nationals are pinned for 1,461 strikeouts. I don't know about that. Maybe. I just think a lot of things have to break right. Maybe they know something we don't. But the Nationals, plus I'm curious to see how they rebuild their farm system over the next couple of drafts. They've got some good players. I'm just curious to see how they develop. I've got the Nationals looking like around 67 to 72 wins. So they're not going to be an easy out, but it's going to be a rough year for them. Moving on to the next National League East team, the Montreal Expos. And here the Expos, they had the third best offseason according to Baseball News Network. And of course, it's that big trade with Philly. Max Ortiz, Joe Olney coming over. Jason Dewey came over as well. They were the big acquisitions. They did lose Gavin Cross, but, all in all, they did make some improvements on the club this year. As you can see, Juan Soto is the big star here. Also, Max Ortiz, Ted Boyd, Glenn Streamer. There's a couple of players I'm interested in to see how they do this year. There's Juan Soto, who struggled last year, had a severe hip strain, was out for 4 months. Can he recover from that? You worry about anybody there. He's on the wrong side of the age 30 for baseball guys. How will he bounce back? Can he? Another player that suffered a couple of months worth of injuries, Glenn Streamer, had a hamstring problem that he lost 2 months to. He would have been in the top 10 second baseman, I think, otherwise, considering what his profile looked like. The question is, can they stay healthy? And can their young players improve? My real concern, though, overall is the relative. There's nobody here who at this point looks like they could just take this team on their back and drive them for a couple, 3 weeks, winning 6 out of every 7 or 8 games, kind of have a hot streak there. There's some good depth, but we're mostly looking at average to slightly above average overall talent. So that could be a concern in terms of scoring runs. The pitching is rated in the top third of the National League. Jorge Alemán, or Alemán, however you pronounce that, is kind of the leader of that staff. Aaron Nola is also projected to have a really good season this year, closer to what he did for the Yankees in 2028, as opposed to what he's done in Montreal. They have a lot of depth and a lot of pieces here. This is a deep staff. But caution you, this is a team that is building for the future. Ted Boyd is a great two-way player. We will see how much pitching he does as opposed to hitting. He really took off as their left fielder last year. They're projected to win 72 games. I kind of feel like that's in the wheelhouse. They, like Portland, have deep farm systems and have done a very good job of stocking them. And I'm curious to see what they become as they move forward. I see the Expos around 72 wins. That will put them in 4th-ish in the National League East. We'll wrap up our NL East preview with a look at the Atlanta Braves. Atlanta under new management. They brought in some new players. Tank Espelin, Shohei Ohtani, Alejandro Rosario. We're working on shoring up some of the issues, or at least trying to. They lost several bullpen pieces to free agency, but they've got some depth there. Juan Monroy, who's currently on the injured list, one of their better players to go along with Kenny Lindbergh, Isaac Granados, and Gorgo. What concerns me is the lack of depth here. There's a lot of corner infielders and outfielders here. It's up the middle that they are weak and could potentially struggle the most with. And I'm curious to see kind of what happens as the season goes along. There's no room for error in terms of like injuries or slumps, things like that. They are projected as next to last in runs scored. So that's going to be a problem, I think, getting men across the plate. The pitching, there's a lot of it. There are enough pieces here, I feel like, to create a competent staff. Max Powers is pretty much going to be the leader of this as their lead pitcher. Rosario should be helpful as well, coming over from Seattle. But this is a team that has some growing to do. Forrest Whitley has been the closer their ace bullpen guy for the last couple of years. They're trying to figure out the pieces in between to get him to a spot where he can close more games. I think the hitting is really going to hold this team back. I think they really need a rebuild of the farm system as well. They've got pieces. I think it just needs to be more fully fleshed out. It's a work in progress. I see them as being somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 to 65 wins. So they're going to be in competition for a high draft pick. But the future potentially looks pretty bright for Atlanta as they move forward. And we'll wrap up our NL East preview with them. They're coming in and they will bring up the rear in the NL East. Move now to the NL Central and the world champs, the St. Louis Cardinals. They were busy in the offseason. They had a lot of movement. 47 players that were either coming in or leaving the Cardinal organization in the offseason. We saw they broke a lot of news this past offseason with trades. They brought in Danny Diaz, David Leal also. They did lose Dylan Humphrey, Dalen Lyle, Tony Courtney. But this is a tremendously potent offense. They're led by Shane Rodecker and Matt Bellows, Andrew Alexander, Royce Lewis, who is just kind of an everywhere man for them and really incredible player. W.S. Franco had a great postseason and hopefully will kind of build on that. And there's just a lot of depth here, especially in the middle of the infield. So, like if there are injuries or slumps, there are options. They are considered the fourth best offense in eMLB in total, second in the National League, only to Philadelphia. And you can see why. They've got great table setters. They've got guys who can drive the ball and drive runners in. Even their 7, 8, 9 hitters are dangerous and can be extremely effective. Plus, all-around great players, great defense will really help them. The pitching staff, just as equally phenomenal. Cy Young candidate Torrey Allenson, looking to have a duplicate of last season. Louis Almendarez, great. Leal comes in to help support Cole Winn. This Leal thing, I think, is the key, because last year when they had the pitching injuries in the postseason, it really had to hunt and peck and try to figure it out, and they did. But Leal gives them another quality arm that they can put in. They don't have to struggle so much worrying about what it's going to look like down the line. The bullpen will be great. There's a lot of pieces there. Ultimately, I think this is a team, they're going to win the Central. I feel like they're the class of the division. Looking at 95 to 100. I feel like they're going to Pittsburgh. Now that my screen has come back. Pittsburgh's the next team. They were considered to have the next to last, or the next to worst, rather, in off seasons this past year, primarily because of the trades that sent Fleury and Bracamontes away, as well as Justin Sharp. They got some good players returning: Tony Courtney, Jim Lowell, Blake Snell. Steve Parkerson is going to be an interesting addition here as well. And Jackson Robertson also. The offense is led by Barry Bonds. He is a tremendous player. And now with Robertson kind of up at the the top or near the top. Can be some interesting play going on there. This is a very young squad. You look at the top 5 hitters, they're all under the age of 27. Not yet in their prime, any of them. Going to be a very good offensive team. Jerome Bettis, the winner of the Home Run Derby and the CCP Festival, just a tremendous power bat. Steve Austin, I feel like a lot of times he gets overshadowed. He's had some injury issues, but I think, he can recover from that. The pitching, of course, in the lineup, I also forgot to talk about one of the players, Cody Cochin, who's the best two-way player in baseball. Bruce Wayne. Parkerson, like I said, gives them a very interesting dynamic. Coming in, not only can be in the bullpen, but throw a lot of innings in the process. We'll see if he can bounce back. A lot of depth here as well. Cody was retooling, redecorating almost, I think. There seemed to be a purpose in mind behind it. And it will be curious to see Kenny Lindbergh now moving into the Pittsburgh office, how he will continue that. I think he will. I think this is a good team. The question is, with all the changes, does everything click day one? Or do we have a situation where it takes some time to adjust and maybe they struggle a little bit early and then kind of come back towards the end? I'm leaning towards the latter. I think there's going to be some chemistry issues early and just kind of figuring out who gets where. I see this team finishing at around 500 for the course of the year, but I think it's a good step forward. We will see how they progress. Pittsburgh, there in the NL Central. Now let's move to the Chicago Cubs. The Cubs have been subject of a lot of conversation. They had the 5th best offseason. They brought in Marc-Andre Fleury. They brought in Kenny Rodriguez, Charlie Middleton. They did lose Kent Herbeck, Ronnie Mauricio, Moore, Soho. They've had to rebuild their middle of their infield. Of course, they are led by one of the great players of this generation, Danny Smith Jr. And he is projected to have a phenomenal, almost a 40-40 season. Going to be in competition for the MVP award, according to those projections. I can't wait to see what Marc-Andre Fleury does. I think he had 30 homers and hit 323. He's coming to a better park for him. I think the offense is going to be really helped by that. This is going to be a productive group. Anthony Godwin, Jackie Roberts, Danny White, Kenny Rodriguez, all of those guys. The one question I have, it's not a high bar to clear, but how competitive can Mac Horvath be as the coming over from Milwaukee, replacing Tank? How competitive can he be in terms of offense? Can he provide enough for them? I think that's a small question in the grand scheme of things. However, we'll see how that goes. As far as the pitching, they're led by Steve Randolph, Hervé Briand, Noah Song, Braylon Marquez. They have some good pieces here as well. They should be very competitive. I like the deep bullpen. I like there's a lot that they can do here. I feel like this is a team that will be able to adjust on the fly. I know there are concerns about the overall finances. We'll see how that plays out. Some teams, it's a constant thing, and they somehow manage to survive. I feel like the Cubs are going to do that here. I'm going to go out on a limb here. They are in the preseason predictions put in the 83 win category, so just around 500. I think they're going to be 85 to possibly 90 wins. I feel they will be in second place in the Central, quite possibly competing for a playoff spot, a wild card position. That's where I think the Cubs come in. Let's move to one of my favorite teams so far in the 2031 season, the Milwaukee Brewers. According to Baseball News Network, they had the second best offseason. They traded for Chad Cuff. They got Dalen Lyle, who's now their leadoff hitter. They got Charlie Moore, Walker Smith. This is a nice, deep team. They got Eric Carpenter. They did lose Bettis. They lost quite a few bullpen arms. This doesn't look like a team that lost more than they gained, in my opinion. Their offense is expected to be in the bottom third of the league, and I see that. As you look at them, Danny Bradford and Dalen Lyle are their high-quality guys, as well as Smith. So there's a lot of new folks here. Bobby Witt, going to be interesting to see how he does this coming season. I like the trade that brought Leonardo Kingston in. He played last year in Toronto. Hey, this kid is going to be a star, and I think he is going to take some of the pain away from the Bettis trade. Like he kind of slots right in where Bettis was going to be. Probably just a bit behind him, though, although he is projected he could possibly play this year. So we will see how they do there. Over on the mound, mentioned Cuff and Carpenter coming in, and that bolsters Gabe Hillman. There's a redesigned bullpen here. That should help, and I think they've got some good talent. Do worry beyond these top three pitchers as to who is going to get the ball in the fourth and fifth spot. I worry a bit about the offense. I hope they can make some deals. I think they've done some really good work. They've got 4 prospects in the top 40 according to OSA. Kingston seems to be the closest to being ready. The other 3 are a year or 2 away. I like what the Brewers are doing here, and I feel like they are going to build. Right now, I think they're going to be close to 75 to 80 wins. So close to competitive. Oh, that is competitive, 75 to 80, just a shade off of 500. And the Milwaukee Brewers, we're wrapping up their 2031 preview here in the NL Central. Our final NL Central team are the Cincinnati Reds. Some up and down seasons the last couple of years. Just went into full free fall last year. Trey Griffey was mentioned in a lot of trade rumors. He is still here. They did get Santiago Flores, so they got another pitcher. Great arm, strike folks out. They did lose Carlos Correa and CCP Robert Hassel III. They had underperformed last year, but you've got Trey Griffey, who for generations the Griffeys have cemented things in Cincinnati. He's had a great year after great year, fully expecting that again. One player that I think is going to be incredible, and whether he breaks camp with the team or not, or whether he comes up later, Johnny Ossington, great prospect. He is going to be a phenomenal player. You see that power rating. I mean, he's already a plus power guy in eMLB. He is going to be exciting to watch. There's a lot of young talent here. You look at the ages of these guys who are still in spring training with them and kind of the roles they're playing. Camden Clark, great behind the plate. Matt Watson, curious to see if he can regain his leadoff ways that he had years ago. George Mendros, another young player. So this is a team with a lot to look forward to in the future. I think the question is going to be how they do this year. I think they need a lot of table setters. They need to figure out kind of see who rises to the occasion to help provide them offense is basically what's going to happen there. As far as pitching, Jimmy Potts is far and away the leader on this team. There's Flores came in, Juan Vargas in the bullpen. There is a lot of depth, but one of the things that is the biggest concern, keeping the ball in the park. Great American Ballpark is a hitter's park. Pitchers get abused. We've seen it with the likes of Jimmy Hernandez and some of the other guys who basically can deal with that baptism by fire is the real question. They're rebuilding, but I don't think they're in. I think that free fall was a little bit of an outlier. I see them kind of responding with 72 to 78 wins. They too will be competitive. Just I feel like with some of their big young stars a couple of years away, I think it'll be interesting to see what they'll be like in the future. But that's where I see the Reds finishing this season. We're down to our final division, the National League West. The team that, I won't say surprised, but they weren't everybody's pick to finish first last year. The San Francisco Giants, they had a very quiet offseason. They did pick up John Cotton and a bullpen arm in Cal Maduro, which we'll talk about that in a minute. They have an excellent core four. The Candelas, Michael Sean Kane, Jamie Thurman are just the nucleus of a tremendous baseball team. Now, the team has expressed concerns about depth, especially since Thurman and Ethan Candela are two-way players, trying to get them the rest they need while getting quality at-bats in the outfield, either when they're pitching or when they're given a well-deserved day off. The Cotton move kind of helps with that. There's Mayron Catalina. There's Dan Summers and Dan King. There's some work to do here, though, and there's some question as to just how that's going to play out. Be curious to watch that as we go along. They're expected, they project to be near the bottom of the league in home runs, but third in scoring runs overall. They constantly have men on base. They're really good at drawing the walk. Cam is expected to win another batting title back-to-back. He is a phenomenal hitter as well. As far as the pitching, again, Candela and Thurman lead the way. Roberto Perry is good there. Jerry Rollins is a solid pitcher, so they have a quality staff. The bullpen, I like the move from Maduro. It gives them another flexible arm who can do everything. You need him to come in and pitch 2, 3, 4 innings, or 2 or 3 innings. He can. You need him to come in and close. He can do that. Going to be curious to see how he's used and what the impact is for the Giants. This bullpen is under-recognized. We don't often think about them in the way that bullpen is managed. But Mike's done a good job here in San Francisco with that. They're projected to give up the fewest runs in the National League. That's how good this pitching staff is. Second in all of eMLB, only Toronto is expected to give up fewer runs. I like this team for 95 to 100 wins. As you look at the Baseball News Network projection, they've got them kind of right in the middle there, 97, and they see them winning the division. Can't argue with that. San Francisco Giants are going to be something this year coming up. Looking at the San Diego Padres, they lost some quality hitters. They lost Shamar Hosky, Judge Dozier. I think they were more complementary pieces. You see the guys who are still left, the players that are still left, the Kims, Tatis, Reyes, Rookie of the Year, Jack Lawless. This is still a very dominant offense, can do that. I'm curious to see. Asher Kim is a free agent after this season. I don't expect him to make it to free agency, but we will see. Some serious questions as far as what that contract would look like and how that impacts San Diego going forward. But let's focus on just this year and what comes of it. You see the hitters. Tatis, he lost some time due to injury. He's the one that I have real question about, because if you look, he fractured a finger and a thumb on his right hand and bruised a finger. His right hand took a beating last year. I wonder what kind of long-term impact that's going to have, if any. He's had his fair share of injuries, had been relatively injury-free there in the mid-years, and none during the World Series run. But I'm curious to see what Tatis is going to end up playing like. Lawless is going to be phenomenal. Reyes, good all-around player, better offensively. Curious to see if he can keep producing as well. As far as the pitchers, I'm kind of blown away by this. If you look at the OSA ratings, 7 of the top 8 pitchers per OSA on this team are 25 and younger. You have to go all the way down here to Jorge Lozada at 32 years of age and Whiskey Monster at 27 to be anywhere near high-quality guys who have some age on them. This pitching staff is going to be better and better as the season and as the next few years, and it might be the secret sauce that keeps the Padres extremely competitive for the next few years. They're projected as the 3rd best staff in the National League, highly competitive, and not a bunch of huge names here. You do have Hudson and Sherman and Arnett and Flores, an extremely good top of the rotation. The projection has them finishing a handful of games, and it's the most competitive race in the National League. I think it's actually closer than this. I think they too are in the 95 to 100 range, and that means that either of these two teams could potentially win the NL West. The question will be, can they push each other enough to sneak past either St. Louis or Philly for a bye in the first round? That would be my question. Let's go to the LA Dodgers, who, according to BNN, had the 6th best offseason. They brought in Edgar Barrios. They brought in Eddie Herring, Seiya Suzuki, Alex Kirilloff. They did lose Rob Deere Jr. And that was a huge trade, big bat to lose. But they also do have some competitive players. Right now, CCP's Dwayne Elizondo Camacho and Darius McKenzie are the top players on the team. Barrios and Suzuki coming in right behind. Great story, Andrew Vaughn, still continuing to shine at first base. This is a good ball club. Barrios gives them added home runs, and they need that. They're expected to be middle of the pack offensively. You can kind of see why. They're great at. They've got quite a few above average guys. Curious to see what the leadoff spots are going to look like, how that's all going to play out, and whether it's going to produce a lot of runs. Whether the guys down here at the bottom third are going to score and drive in enough to kind of keep the party going as the lineup turns over. In terms of pitching, This team is kind of exactly the opposite of San Diego in terms of age. This is a veteran staff. They're led by Jim Giesler, Jordan Hicks. Taco Existential is a CCP. It looks like Angel De Jesus, who's one of the best prospects in baseball, is getting an opportunity here in spring training to potentially win the closer's job, or at least win a spot on the team for this year. No reason he can't. He did a great job last year in Oklahoma City. There are questions here as well. But the pitching is kind of in the top, kind of like in the middle. If you want to say top of the bottom third, you could say that. There are questions. I think the Dodgers have made some moves. I think the Deer trade kind of sets a realistic expectation on this year that, it might start out kind of poor. I do expect some trades and some moves during the season. It's typical Dodgers style. I see them as close to 500. I think they'll end the season close to 500, give or take whatever moves they make in the process. But the Dodgers should be at least fielding a competitive team here and in the seasons to come. Moving now, we're almost done. Colorado Rockies are our next team. And they are a team, they brought in Bo Bichette and CJ Arsenault. They did lose a lot. They lost Louis Flores. They lost Bill Wirtz and Mackenzie Gore. On offense, they're led by Andre Dawson III, Theodore Williamson. They've got a really cool two-way player in Sven De Bruin, who in Double-A last year hit very well. Triple-A last year did very well for himself. Came up last year towards the end, only focused on pitching. Got a cup of coffee, got a taste. He is going to be an interesting player going forward. There's a lot of youth here as well. Not all of it ready for the majors. They have a need for some good power. They need a lot of that. Cores will help. Cores kind of pushes this offense into like middle of the pack. But overall, in terms of just talent-wise, up and down the lineup, this is not a very potent offense. The pitching is improved. They have the opposite problem of playing in cores. They just have to deal with that. Johnny Watson and Daniel Pratt, along with Juan Aguilar, are the keys here. Eric Cager, going to be interesting to see what he does and see if how Sven does. If he does stick with the big club, will he get any time as well? There are a lot of questions. There's a lot of potential here, though. This year, I don't think Colorado is going to be competitive, but this farm system is deep. We're going to take a strong look at them when we get into our prospect evaluation coming shortly. But the Colorado Rockies this year, they're going to look like 62 to 68 wins for the season. Don't expect them to really be challenging for anything. Just a placeholder year while some of their new talent comes on board. And then our last team, the Arizona Diamondbacks. And I hope you've enjoyed this look at the net. Can't hide from it. Let's do this. They signed AJ Minter. They did lose several pitchers. Andre Palante, they lost, probably the best arm out of that. This is a team kind of like Colorado. There's not a lot here right now. If you look at offensively, and who they have. There's Ryan Creedler. There's Butch Reed. Hendry Mendez is the guy that everybody is just raving about. You see the 100 power arm, and he is going to be phenomenal. What I question is he's kind of got some things. If his contact V left was as good, V right, I think you could probably pencil him in opening day lineup. But it's just a Jekyll and Hyde there, both sides of the plate. He's going to be a star. He's going to play in the majors at some point. The question is when. When will he be ready? And I think the new Arizona general manager will have a good time figuring that out. This is a team that has a lot of role players, good, not great. There is some young talent here that projects that could play soon. So there is hope. Excited for the CCPs, Aaron Cross, Chris Michael Punk, Ben Cisco, J.C. Swishman's community created player. I think there's going to be some exciting times as we get into down the road with Arizona. The pitching is rated to be the worst in baseball. And as you can see, the only one who's really good, Edward Elric. I will say, however, there's one guy on the DL, Brock Rutherford, who will also be good going forward. The question will be, he's probably going to get rehab time after his Tommy John surgery. We'll see how he bounces back, see how he performs. He too is a CCP. This team is in the midst of a rebuild, and there is a lot of future talent coming. You've got guys like Ricky Tiedemann, Chris Herbert, Tommy Toney that will potentially be very good. It's just we're nowhere near here right now. I don't think they're going to give up as many runs as the projection suggests. The projection has them at 924. I think with Rutherford coming back and kind of Elric providing a 1-2 punch, hoping Hunter Gaddis kind of gets it back together again. They won't. But all in all, I think this team is going to be competing for the first round pick, for the first pick overall. I see them winning 55 to 60 games at most. That's the Arizona Diamondbacks. So now we're looking at these standings and looking at who's there. Who do we think is going to make the playoffs? I think, well, first of all, Philadelphia and St. Louis, I feel like are solid 1-2 picks for the National League playoffs. I think they get the bye. I think the Giants and Padres, whichever one of those teams wins out, will get a home. We'll get to play the home field for the wild card round. I see the Cubs and the Mets leapfrogging the Pirates and the Marlins respectively and making the playoffs for the reasons that I mentioned earlier. I think the Giants and Padres come out of the wild card round. So basically we're talking a chalk kind of playoffs here. I think Philly and St. Louis hold on and win their divisional series, and they will play each other in the NLCS. I think it will be an epic NLCS. And then I think that leaves us to our top four. So in the American League, we had the White Sox in Texas, Philly and St. Louis in the National League. I think the NLCSs will be great. I hope they get a lot of coverage. I hope we can have as many managed games as possible in both series. I think Texas is going to extract a measure of revenge. and win the American League in 2031. I think since Philly has pushed all their chips to the table, I think it's going to be just enough. I think that's going to be a competitive 6-7 game series, and they will make it to the World Series. And so it's Philly and Texas for all the marbles in the 2031 World Series. Who do I think wins that? I have no idea. I wish we could hand out multiple trophies, but that's not the way sports works. I would be happy for any of these teams to win. And I doubt that I'm right. I'm sure the playoffs will work out completely opposite. But if I had to pick, I think Philly is going to beat Texas in a great 7-game World Series. Hope you've enjoyed the preview of both the American and the National League. We are a week away from real live, honest to God, regular season baseball. Can't wait for it. We only have one team that needs a general manager. If you are interested, hit up Commish LB. He will be glad to consider your candidacy, I am sure. It's a team with a lot of potential. Until next time, when we begin to count down the top 100 prospects in eMLB and look at each farm system in eMLB, I'm Tim Lowry with Backfields Media. Sorry we were having some camera issues today, but wanted to get this out for you. Have a great rest of spring training. Look to see you on opening day. Talk to you then.